Hey everyone, it's Austin in the middle, and I hope you're having a great day so far today. I have a movie review that's been a long time coming of one of my favorite films of all time. Yes, I said it. I'm not going to apologize. I love this movie. It is what it is. But I've loved this movie for 20 years. I watch it every year around my birthday and during the summertime, so it's a biannually movie. And it gets better and better and better every time I watch it. And I can honestly say, they just don't make movies like this anymore. And it's sad. It's very sad. That movie is Agent Cody Banks from 2003, released by MGM, starring Frankie Muniz, who you might recognize from Malcolm in the Middle, and Hilary Duff, who you might recognize from Lizzie McGuire. Now, I remember the first time I saw this trailer of this film. I was 8 years old. It was on television sometime around late 2002 and early 2003. And I just remember being blown away by how badass the trailer was. And I was like, I have to see this movie. I have to learn more about it. I go on my compact desktop computer I had in my room. It was very archaic. It was the early 2000s, people, forgive me. And I see that the film's releasing on my birthday that year, in 2003. And I tell my mom immediately, we have to see this movie on my birthday. And she's like, okay, we'll see what we can do. You have school that day. It's going to be a Friday. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And she kept teasing me about it until the day of my birthday, where she surprisingly showed up at my lunch. And she said, hey, we're going to leave school after lunch, and we're going to go see Agent Cody Banks. And I was floored, excited, and I remember I had my popcorn and my drink, and I was just so antsy to see the movie, and I watched it with her, and me and her laughed and had just a fun time with it, and we chatted about it on the car ride home. And it's just one of the most fondest memories of my childhood. It's one of my favorite memories with just me and my mom growing up. But that being aside, that's not saying that that memory really affects my opinion of this movie all that much, even though when I look at it, it does remind me of it. This movie is shockingly good and probably doesn't deserve to be as good as it is to its own merit. To me, the early 2000s were a special time as a millennial generation kid who grew up around this time. We got introduced to a bunch of movies that kind of echo the same sentiment this film was doing. And I have to just say, even though there's a lot of competition out there in this subgenre of kids' early 2000s spy movies like Spy Kids and Catch That Kid, this movie kind of defies that, because it brings to light what movies like Big Fat Liar and Clock Stoppers were doing around the time. And that was creating the perfect teenage fantasy escapism film. That's what this film is. It's just pure teenage fantasy escapism. It has all the common tropes of a teenage fantasy done very well, and it's just a purely entertaining film to the core. That's all you can ask for a film like this, and it's perfect for that reason. Now, to me, the teenage fantasy, and the reason why so many millennials are enamored by these early 2000s movies, is because these films were able to capture what the young kids and teenagers around this time imagined an ideal version of their life to be, right? You have these characters like in Clock Stoppers, Big Fat Liar, Agent Cody Banks, who live these mundane lifestyles of just doing chores, going to school, doing homework, having to face the tribulations of being grounded, going to summer school, and you name it. But they have been thwarted into some unconventional circumstances that make them larger than life. Like in Big Fat Liar, where the main character writes an essay that a movie producer steals from him and turns into a movie. Or Clock Stoppers, where a teenager's dad is working with this guy who's able to work on technology that can stop time, and creates this watch, and the kid acquires it and pretty much becomes a superhero if he wanted to be. And then Agent Cody Banks, right? Where you have a character who lives a normal life, but has an alter ego that he hides from everybody. He has to hide this fact that he's in the CIA kids program, and he's been trained under the eyes and under the thumb of parental authority. And he longs for that life, but he has to be chained to his normal life until he can await the time where he can be what he wants to do. And that's just the ideal teenage fantasy, right? And not only that, Agent Cody Banks does deliver on some other things that kids wanted, like the ability to have access to resources that adults normally would only have access to, like cool rocket gadgets, cool high-tech watches, weapons of some kind, martial arts training, where they're trained to literally be lethal with their hands. That's just cool stuff that teenagers think is cool, right? Just badass shit. And then you have the romance aspect to the teenage fantasy. That's always on the minds of teenagers. Having a crush, liking somebody, wanting to be in a relationship with that person, wanting to be close with them, right? It's no different in this film. It's perfect for what it is. Now, cool little fact, in case you didn't know, Madonna is a producer on this film. Madonna, the famous pop star and actress, saw the script of this film, thought it was so much fun that she purchased it, or, I don't know, became acquainted with it in some way, and helped promote it to get it made by MGM eventually. And I think that's a cool little factoid I learned about this film. I did not know that till this past year, when another reviewer, I think Jordan Fringe or somebody, brought it up in one of their videos. And I was blown away by that fact. I had no idea. Even though I saw her name in the credits, I never knew how she was attached to this movie. And that's such a little fun factoid. I might mention it in the special features, I'm not too sure, but yeah. I didn't watch the special features this time through, unfortunately. But this film, right, it is kind of timeless, in my opinion. I watch this movie all the time. It's one of the most rewatchable films I have in my collection. I've had this DVD for many, many years. Maybe at least 18 years. And this is the copy I always watch. I have not upgraded it to Blu-ray. I just don't see the need to, because my modern 4K player can put some DVDs up to 720, sometimes even 1080p. It depends on the quality of disc. But this one plays in really high quality, and there's no really no need to upgrade it at this point. But I've taken care of this because I cherish it, and it's one of my most cherished movies. And it's held up very well. So the story, I think, really is where the compliments I can give mostly come to it. And all you need to know about this, I don't want to give too much spoilers. I'm going to go very superficial over the plot. But there's a scientist that's working on this technology, which are called nanobots. And there's this evil villain who's played by Ian McShane, who I think I've seen him in a few things, but I can't remember which thing specifically. But he's pretty great in this. He's kind of like a James Bond knockoff villain. And he has a sidekick played by Arnold Vosloo from the Mummy movies. They are trying to acquire these nanobots from the scientists to use them to pretty much force the world into their hands and have global domination. Kind of generic, but the nanobot technology is kind of a cool angle. Nanobots can, chew through human bone, skin, they can chew through metal. They're very lethal, and they have to be stored in very cold places to make them inactive. So the evil guy has set up this lair up in this snowy mountain somewhere so they can pretty much make a nanobot farm. And he wants the scientists to reprogram the nanobots to harm humans, and he has like a certain amount of days to get it done. And the scientist is scared but has no other option because he's pretty much been threatened, and his daughter has been threatened. And the daughter is Natalie, who's played by Hilary Duff. Now, the CIA, the head of the CIA, who's played by Keith David, who's absolute gold. Keith David, if you don't know who he is, he was the voice of Goliath from Gargoyles. He was in They Live. He was in John Carpenter's The Thing. Legendary actor. A-lister, if I've ever seen one. He's great in this. And CIA agent pieces together this plot because they had some people undercover kind of spying on this whole nanobot mission, and they got compromised. And now that they know this facet about the scientist's daughter, they want to go into the bank of candidates from their child CIA program that they've recruited and sent to the summer camp and trained these teens that live across the country to get close to Natalie and hopefully solve the nanobot crisis that's going on. So, since this takes place nearby Seattle, they go with the closest agent, who is Cody Banks. And Cody Banks goes to a public school. He's kind of an average kid, but he has some really good training behind himself. He is exhibited throughout the film. He can ride a skateboard very well. He can save a child, do some really cool stunt work. He can fight people. He can work gadgets very well. He's very smart. He's technologically savvy. But his one weakness that's on his file, that's not on his file at least, is that he's not good with girls. And the CIA doesn't know that, but they recruit him anyway to be on this mission to get close to this girl named Natalie. So, Cody gets his handler, who's played by the gorgeous Angie Harmon, and her character is Ronica. And Ronica helps him convince his parents that he needs to go to this prep school that Natalie's just so happens to go at, and pretty much helps him train how to fight, and also gives him some tips on how to talk to girls, because it's revealed pretty early on that he's not really suave like his file said. He goes throughout this movie trying to get close to this girl named Natalie on this mission, but kind of failing because he's trying to show off too much and kind of not being himself, because he thinks that she would be more attracted to this ego he's kind of made of himself. And he does some things to try to impress her, like do some stunt car work. That doesn't seem to work all that much on her. But once he starts acting like himself, him and her develop a real relationship. And as that relationship blossoms, it becomes evident that Cody has to come clean to her because he feels bad and guilty about what's going on. And he understands some severity of the situation going on with her father. But there's a wrench thrown in that plan as well. Natalie gets abducted, and now Cody has to find a way to save Natalie, because he compromises the integrity of the mission. He gets pretty much taken out of the mission itself. He no longer has CIA privileges, and he has to go solo and figure out how to correct the mistakes he made. And we all see this come to fruition near the end, where he ends up saving the day in a badass way. He ends up proving himself to the CIA, and he ends up getting the girl. Poetic end to an entertaining film, I would say. And that's what you're going to get out of Agent Cody Banks now. So, I don't know where to start. This film normally gets criticized for a few things, and I guess I'll bring them up, because I don't really find them as deal breakers for me. But the first thing is the acting, mainly from Hilary Duff and also Frankie Muniz. Their acting is very akin to their acting performances in Malcolm in the Middle and Lizzie McGuire. And since I grew up on those shows, I don't really have much animosity towards either of them. Frankie Muniz, he feels like the same acting in everything he does. I don't really have an issue with that, because I love Malcolm in the Middle, and he's not a deterrent there. But Hilary Duff does kind of stick out to me. It's not really an issue I have outright. It's something I can forgive a little bit, but yeah, she's probably the weakest performance in this whole movie. Everything else, everybody does a great job. Cody's parents, Cody's brother, Keith David, of course, Angie Harmon. The villains, Arnold Vosloo and Ian McCain, whatever his name is. I always forget his last name. Ian McShane. They all do great performances, despite the fact that the script, I'm not gonna lie, the script is kind of basic level dialogue and stuff, but nothing offensive. As a matter of fact, it's all inoffensive stuff. It's just very basic dialogue, easy to digest. They're not going overly into exposition like most modern kids movies tend to go down these days. It's just sticking to, hey, we're going with this plot that this kid, he was trained by the CIA. We give brief backstory to it. We introduce him to the story. He's going to be an agent off the bat. Boom. There you go. And it's very cut and dry. Very cut and dry script, but it's nothing bad. But I will point that out. If people think that that's an issue with the movie, that's understandable. Another thing I want to kind of point out that I don't agree with is the cliche-ness to this movie. Yes, this movie does use spy movie tropes. It does. But, to be fair, it does it a little bit differently with an added layer that normally doesn't get highlighted in these, right? You have this superhero trope added onto it. You have this alter ego identity with Cody Banks. He's a kid by day, agent by night. That's literally what it's trying to go for. And I think that's a cool way to invert the spy trope a little bit. It kind of makes it more of like a superhero flair in storytelling. And what I dig about it is that Cody lives that mundane life. He's that everyday teenager, but he also has that responsibility of keeping up with his home life, keeping up with his personal, affairs, but also putting up a front for his mission, and also trying to maintain a real budding romantic relationship with this girl named Natalie. And I think there's more layers to the story that people give it credit for. Is it cliche? Not really. If you're going to call it a spy cliche, fine, but I think it does more with it, and I'm more than willing to forgive a lot of things about it because of those layers. Now, the final criticism is the women in the movie, the way that the movie displays their characters, let's just say. It has a lot of backlash these days, and it's understandably so. Let's get the big elephant out of the room. Angie Harmon's character is the most vociferous complaint. People think she's overly sexualized, especially when she's around teenagers the whole movie. Look, the costume designer of this film, for people out there saying that this movie has this misogynistic tone to it, I do kind of see it, but the costume designer who designed these costumes is a woman. Her name is Suzanne McCabe. There you go. She's the one that designed these movies. And Madonna herself, a woman who has naturally sexualized herself in many things she's done over the years, was producing this. So, yeah, it's to be expected. And yeah, you can say that the film writers and the director were men, and maybe they were, whatever. But that's beyond the point. Yeah, some of her outfits are kind of skimpy, but I don't think that's really the issue here. I think it's mostly based on the actions. She goes into locker rooms with a bunch of naked teenagers, and she licks her fingers and touches Cody. If you want to see it like that, that's fine. But to me, I think that she is counterbalanced with those weird things by being just a badass. I mean, she does embarrass those teenage boys that were being just straight up pigs in the locker room. I mean, yeah, it displays a little bit of misogyny, but she corrects it. All right, yeah, she does lick her fingers and touch Frankie Muniz's forehead in a few scenes in the movie, kind of like a mom would, even though she's not his mom. But she has that motherly instinct with him. She's not really being sexualized too much with him. Now, I do think there are some scenes that play up the sexualization, like some songs used and stuff. That's why on this PG rating, it says some sensual content. That's what they're referring to, I'm pretty sure. It doesn't go too far, in my opinion. And it's fine. It's innocent enough. It doesn't go that creepy boundary like some other films do. And the other thing is with Hilary Duff's character, Natalie. People say that her character is kind of written in that typical girl is the object of the story. She's treated like an object. Look, it is what it is. That's kind of true. But, to be fair, Natalie also has her own character arc in the story. And she does more than just being a damsel. There's a scene near the end of the movie that I don't want to spoil, but involves one of those nanobot cubes that we see near the end of the film. And she is straight up badass with that. Let's just put it out there. She has some badass moments in this movie. Yeah, for a teenager, Hilary Duff, some outfit she's wearing, it makes her look like she's 30. Like I said, the costume designer is a woman. Just saying. But, it is what it is. She looks fine. I mean, what was she, like 15 when she made this movie? 16 or something? Whatever. I think there's movies nowadays, and teenagers wear way more revealing stuff nowadays than what she was wearing in that movie. So the criticisms for that, it just feels kind of off, right? But it's, I guess, fair criticism. But my positives to this movie, I want to start off with this. This movie makes me appreciate movies that came out in my generation so much more. You know, especially given today, where you no longer have these movies, right? The old formula was you make a self-contained movie. You put something original out there. You create new characters. You create a new universe. You create new rules. Whatever. And you put it out there into the ether. And if people love it and people enjoy the movie and it's successful, then the afterthought is to make a sequel. A second installment. Now, the second installment we got for Age of Cody Banks came a year after. It seemed like they rushed it just to get it out to capitalize on the hype. And it turned out to be more of an advertising promotion for Beanie Babies, Video Now, and Mentos than anything. And it's more like a shell of the original. But still, the old formula wasn't perfect, but it makes me miss that old formula more. Because nowadays, kids' movies are being targeted in the long-form way by Hollywood. And what I mean by that is they're always trying to plan, we do this movie, and then we have to give them 3 movies. They're trying to capitalize on long-term ability for movies these days. And that's unfortunate because you just can't make a movie like Age of Cody Banks anymore. Hollywood's not willing just to roll the dice on a one-shot movie. They're going to throw out a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie or a Super Mario Brothers movie in hopes that they're going to make a crap ton of money and they're going to be able to make 2-3 more. Maybe that was the thought with Age of Cody Banks, but still, where I also see another issue tied with the modern issue is that they're not creating things from scratch anymore. They're taking long-standing IPs that have some sort of superficial recognition, and they're trying to capitalize on mainstream popularity of video games, comics, whatever, to drill home to kids of stuff that already exists. They don't want to take any chances with kids on original content. And if they do, it's pretty much exclusively on television or YouTube or wherever small-scale platform kids can get entertainment. And it's just such a travesty, right? Spirit Halloween, the movie, prime example. That movie is like a PG-13 made-for-kids movie based around the Spirit Halloween store gimmick. They couldn't even make a physical copy of that for fans or for kids. They had to put it straight to streaming. And we know how that movie got critically slammed and stuff, but still, the ones that are trying to make new content are still trying to use brand recognition to sell movies. They just don't make stuff like this anymore from scratch. Even though this, you can easily say, hey, look, this is kind of like a James Bond ripoff, just a teenage James Bond. Yeah, but it's still an original concept, original character. It has its own universe, own set of rules that the James Bond movies don't really touch on, and it separates itself. And I just miss the small-scale feel of these movies, right? You just get an hour and a half, hour and 40-minute self-contained movie that holds up on its own, that does not feel like it needs to feed into a further installment. It just stands on its own, and you can just watch it at your own leisure. And that's kind of why I think the first film holds up more than the second movie. It's because the first film wraps up the story quite neatly, and the second movie, because it's so rushed, it abandons all the former characters we got to know in this movie, replaces them with new ones, and just changes the tone of the movie. It does have some cool backstory, but it fumbles the ball a bit because the old formula is flawed too, y'all. Like I said already, but for its own issues though. But I just wish they made more movies like this. And this movie makes me appreciate the creativity that they did put into this, right? The visual effects of this film, the stunt work was pretty impressive, especially for a kids movie. I love the fact that the filmmakers here took some liberties into putting some CGI effects. You know, this is the early 2000s. They were experimenting around. But the CGI was actually used pretty much effectively here. They couldn't do so much with practical, because I think if they did some practical stuff, it would have looked too real, and they would have had to go on to PG-13 or maybe even rated R territory, especially the scene near the end when you see what happens to the villain. That shit scared the frick out of me when I was a kid, alright? And there's some really jarring stuff done with this henchman that if they even tweaked it a little bit to make it more violent, this would have been easily PG-13. Or even if they pushed the envelope on the raunchiness in some scenes, it could have been PG-13, right? But nonetheless, I'm talking about the effects here. The effects look great. The effects hold up. The CGI holds up. The stunt work, like I said, there's some cool stunts involving skateboards. There's a beautiful snowboard summit scene that looks absolutely incredible. It was very well done. The practical they did use, they made like some gadgetry, like rocket-powered surfboards and snowboards, and they made this cool little 2000s looking like helicopter jetpack. That thing looked badass. I mean, there's so much cool stuff in here, and I have to give the effects team props for this. It holds up. It's very 2000s, but it is what it is. Now, another thing I noticed, and I think a lot of you might notice this if I point it out to you, I don't know if this is true, but the containment cell that Natalie's held in the lair near the ending of the movie looks eerily similar to the same containment cell that was used in another MGM movie from the 90s called Species. I don't know if it's true, but that might be a reused prop there. And it also weirdly looks like the containment cell that was used in Clock Stoppers from Nickelodeon. I'm just throwing that out there. I've never seen anybody else bring that up, but they all kind of blend together and look kind of the same. Maybe with some few tweaks to kind of separate it, but yeah, that see-through glass containment thing, yeah, I wonder. But still, great looking movie. I love the color hues to it. The setting choices they used were all believable, like the mansion of Natalie, whose dad is a high-tech inventor. That's believable. The prep school that looks exorbitantly expensive, that's believable. The CIA headquarters that they all go to looks really believable as well. That looks like something that they would actually go to, like a bunker style. And the layer at the end was really cool. Set aside in the mountain, and you have this cool little factory thing set up. It looked great. And the hues of the movie really bring out the quality of the film too. I think the color hues was great. And yeah, it's a great looking film. And the last compliment I can give to it is the very 2000 soundtrack, like the song by Juke, Life is Good. That's a banger song. I don't care what people say. Banger song. Then there's that Nelly song that says Hot Damn. I forget the name of it. That introduces Ronica. Iconic song. It's very much a 2000 soundtrack, but the songs that were used, that were on the radio, were pretty well placed. And even the inventive music that they added on their own to the film to kind of replicate that spy sound has their own style to it, so that when you hear it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I recognize that song. That's Agent Cody Banks' theme song. It's very memorable theme music. It's very catchy, not detracting whatsoever, and it carries throughout the film, and it kind of sets the tone for it. All in all, Agent Cody Banks is a lighthearted teenage fantasy with some deeper layers than people give it credit for. I definitely think it's one of the most criminally underrated kids movies ever made of all time. It's one of my personal favorite movies. It's not going to be like that for everyone. I totally understand if you like other movies from around this time more than this, but I love it. And I'll give this movie a 5 out of 5 stars. I really don't have any real complaints about it. Some nitpicks, if I really wanted to go into it, but I don't really think they really matter. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Agent Cody Banks. Let me know down in the comment section. Do you love this movie? Do you hate this movie? I'm dying to know. and I'll see you next time.